Salute. Knicks Nation. The streets are buzzing. Salute to the chat. Salute replay gang. Ready to talk about today's loss. My man EJ, how we doing?
CT, I don't know if you can categorize today's game as a loss. Yeah, I think that today's loss was more of like maybe a burial. Maybe when you look at it, that kind of game, that kind of effort, it wasn't a loss. It was more than a loss. It was troubling, absolutely troubling.
Yep. Good to get your initial thoughts. Look, for me, I will say this. I was watching a lot of the World Cup as well. But when I saw the score, the Knicks were cruising again. So, and I've gone back and watched the game, obviously, again. The Knicks create ways to lose, find new ways to lose games now. Like I've been saying all season long, it's not really loss, it's how you lose, really. We know this is a 500 team, and we've talked about its shortcomings, and we could handle losses. But when there's a trend like bad home losses, that's the undoing of somebody. I put in the chat. I'm sure Dolan was there in the building today. This has probably been 3 or 4 really bad losses at home. So, how do you describe this loss?
In chat, we're gonna definitely need you tonight. This is one of those. This is one of those games where, if you are a true blue Knicks fan, you are hurting, you're confused, you are frustrated because of how poorly they played today. So my 3 takeaways from today's game, the matinee game. The first thing, as I pull up my notes, I was trying to be a journalist. The first quarter, was everything that you hoped that they could be on a matinee game. If you've been a Knicks fan for a while, you know that when there's a 12 p.m., 12:30 start time, you're worried that they're not going to play well, that there's going to be a really sluggish game. And with that first quarter, there was a lot of optimism. Julius seemed to really be in control, to really be tempered, to be really efficient. Some of the things we talked about last night with regards to RJ, there seemed to be hope that he was going to move the ball. Q Dot had an amazing finishing play. So, the first quarter was amazing. However, when we started getting into the second quarter, into the third quarter, when I tell you it was an offensive stupor, I live in New York City, and I've seen some stupors before. The LIRR at Penn Station, if you are a New York City person, if you live in New York City, and you've been out at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, you've seen some stupors for Walking Dead. That's what we saw today, second quarter into third quarter. To have a almost 40-point swing. No words. Absolutely no words.
Brings a new. Keep going. Keep going.
I'm about to preach, man. To have Tim Hardaway say, "This is my city."
He denied that, by the way.
No.
When asked that in the post press conference, he said something else. So, give us your thoughts and chat.
The feed I was watching, you could see clearly. I don't know the best. You know what? Let's do this. Let's do this. The best performance today, like if we were to rank who really balled out today, it was the MSG cameraman. The MSG cameraman caught shots today that really illuminated and really highlighted why today was so frustrating. So after Tim Hardaway caught fire and they called a timeout, you could clearly see. I don't know if there was an agreement between Tim Hardaway and the MSG cameraman. Directly plain as day, him mouthing the words, "This is my city."
My
Now he
city.
didn't yell it, but
Yeah.
like clearly see he was looking down. He was like, "This is my city." So I know he denied it, but you know, it looked like he.
Yeah.
I'm not a mouth reader. I'm not a lip reader, but it looked kind of clear that's what he said.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, players show their frustration. He was traded twice, but the Knicks also gave him the bag twice.
Yeah, yeah.
But
But CT,
whether it's
sorry about that.
yeah,
But it's part of what we said last night, though, is that barely stars are never stars become superstars when they play at MSG, and that's problematic.
yeah, that was the point I was going to make. He took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah.
It's like it doesn't matter if his name was Tim Hardaway. It was an ex-player, former player, or player that never played for the Knicks. We talked about it last night. People come into the MSG and to be real, they feel like they're at home. They
Hmm.
feel they feel like, hey, this is Broadway. This is just a one night stand, a one night stage show, and I'm the star. And whether it's the Knicks home arena or mine, it doesn't really matter. This arena is the grand stage, and we don't. The Knicks obviously have to fight a little bit harder at home. We said
Hmm.
it's the toughest home arena, but we need more toughness. I mean, and also I said last night we need 48 minutes
Hmm.
of toughness and focus. Like tonight, you could play well for 3 quarters and still get blown out. One
And
one
that's what
bad
happened.
quarter, and our players, Julius Randle and some of our other players that don't give max effort all the time, they allow things like these swings to happen real quick, and it's almost like Tom Thibodeau. He doesn't get all the blame, but he's going to be the first one to go probably because he needs to call a timeout every 2 or 3 minutes because the other team can just go on a tear in a short space of time with the three balls, with stops in transition if Julius and other players aren't running the floor, getting back, and
Hmm.
it could be a 10, 12 point transition in the click of a finger, you know.
Yeah, yeah. When we talked about what we were going to do tonight, like one of the things I was taking notes, there's a point where you hit where you're like, what notes do you take? Like how do you have an intellectual and CT and I think and chat, you guys know this, Knicks Buzz fam, you guys know this. CT and I, we really pride ourselves in trying to be really analytical, really, we will be critical when it's appropriate. But
Mm,
with this kind of game, there's not much you can say in the way of positives. There's not much in the way of really like critical analysis. It gets to the point where it's like even some of the stuff where I was talking about last night in terms of being positive, this is the kind of loss where it embarrasses anyone who tries to put a positive, really nuanced spin on it. I- Players quit today. It was lifeless.
mm,
JJ, JJ, thank you, because that's one of the points I brought up last night was that there's a level of this being a lifeless body right now. And one of the things I was trying to do yesterday was talking about there is potential, but when players start to quit, when the crowd starts to quit, this is where, like, yeah, changes start to happen. And I'll just bring this up really quickly. If you guys, this is why I said the best performance today were the MSG camera people and the Nick kids dancers. They did their thing. God bless you guys. You guys were really working. You were some of the hardest working people in that building tonight because it definitely wasn't our squad. Um, the fourth quarter, the MSG cameraman caught James Dolan texting really profusely during that fourth quarter in
oh, I've
his
got to see
standard
that.
seat. Yeah, so if you pay attention to that feed, you saw him texting profusely. Now, you put that along the lines with some of the reporting. I think Begley talked about that there's intense scrutiny. Um, this is not a good place. I'm not
Mm,
predicting someone getting fired, but there's something. I don't know if he was, scheduling another gig for his band, but he seemed to be furiously texting something um, for the latter part of that fourth quarter, the last 7 or 8 minutes of the game.
yeah, and this ain't something new. Chat EJ, Nick Streets. Like last season, there was a point where William Wesley went to
Hmm.
Dolan, so this ain't really no overreaction. It ain't really something from today. It's just been simmering. It's getting worse. Today was that kind of game where it's like it can tip the owner over the edge, basically. Ian Begley's reporting was, people say Dolan is reactionary. All it takes, it may not be needing 6 bad losses in a row. It might just be one that just hits a nerve, and it's just like he's reactionary. But also, it's got a lot to do with how we lose, how we look. The record really ain't that bad, ladies and gentlemen. It really ain't even about the record. What are we, only 3 games below 500? Still well and truly in the thick of the play-in this season. It's early. But I guess if you are going to make a coaching change, I will say this. It's better to do it this early in the season or just do it at the end of the season. For me. That way, anyone who comes in has like a really long sample size opportunity to coach this team for the rest of this season. So don't wait till the 58th game or don't wait to the 68th game, Do something within these next 5-10 games. Then they have 20 games till the trade period, and then they have the rest of the season. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that, and in reading what's happening in the chat, so Almighty Finesse, I didn't write the minute mark. Normally when I see things as I'm taking notes during the game, I write down the minute mark. At that point, I think it was about 6 minutes left, 6 or 7 minutes left, where Tibbs has cleared the benches. He clearly realized that this was not a winnable game. If you take a look at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, he's seated near the basket in his traditional seat, and he's looking down for most of the fourth quarter. It's right around the time you start to hear some boos coming from the 300 section. And to JJ, your point, that's my frustration. If you look at the 100 section, and that's the point that I raised last night, a lot of people are checked out during the game. Like there isn't that passion coming from the 100s. And if you're not familiar with MSG, the 100s is like the more expensive portion of the Garden. It's where you see like $1,000 seats. You heard some booing from the 300s, which is like the upper part of the arena. But to your point before, CT, this is, I think the next 10 games will really ultimately decide what happens. When the crowd starts booing, when the 300s start booing, you're starting to lose who I'd like to say, the people who are probably on this chat right now, the people who are, paying a lot of money to go to the Garden, JW, I see you, who are frustrated, who aren't there at the Garden just to be seen. They're there because they're buying merch. They're there because they're passionate. They're there because they have a cable subscription to watch these games. So, we all know Tibbs will be the first to go. We all know that. It's not going to be Leon. Usually in sports, GMs, presidents, they get at least 2 coaches. And this is Leon's first. So,
yeah. And we had more proof of that last season because, when Wesley went to Dolan, he then went to Leon and said, you have the right to fire Tom. So he's still giving Leon that full autonomy, decision making. And I don't see Leon going anytime soon. He's going to at least have the rest of this season and one more summer, one more draft, and then next season, and then he's on the hot seat more, I think.
Yeah.
After, if he fires Tibbs, then like your great point yesterday, the clock starts ticking on Leon once he fires Tom. But it's not going to be a good look for him. Tom was his first choice. They're connected. They're close. It's like I keep saying, fam. It's about the way we lose. It's the way we lost. I mean, it's not like Dallas were coming in hot. They were a team under immense pressure today.
Yeah.
The Knicks were under not as much pressure, and somehow after 48 minutes, the roles are reversed. The Knicks are the team under the most pressure out of the two now. Dallas still need to make some moves, make upgrades. Luka's not too happy with them underachieving in the wild west. But in terms of the Knicks, like we can only categorically say that we're better than Detroit, Orlando, and Chat and you help me out. Who else are we categorically better than?
Oof. Let me pull up some of these stats and records.
Yeah.
I think that's the complexity of the situation right now. Is and oh, by the way, before I forget to, um, I stopped taking notes when Spencer Dinwiddie.
Oh, you had to say his name,
Yeah. Oh,
Mr. Crypto.
oh my gosh. He is really like when you are getting blown out and Spencer Dinwiddie is on the winning team, it's a very hard afternoon. It's a very hard loss because he's, but to your question, who are we better than? I think for some of us, and if you didn't have a chance, please make sure to check out John Smelk's post about being on the program last night. He had a tweet last night, which I guess we're going to talk about too as well. But
Yeah.
we were trying to have a nuanced conversation about where the Knicks are before today's clunker. Um, but in terms of who are we better than, one of the things we mentioned yesterday is that we all pretty much had the expectation that given the talent that the Knicks have versus the rest of the conference, the Knicks seemed to have presented at the start of the season that they were going to be somewhere around the 500 mark. And everyone we had a conversation with at the start of the season said either, 41, 41, I went 42, 40. I think CTU went 44, 40.
Yeah.
I think Mark at the time went 38, somewhere in the area like that.
You went 41, I think. I think
41,
you said
yeah.
500. Yeah. I said
So
45.
40. So the frustration right now is that this game should have been it should have been a lot more balanced. There should have been more
Yeah.
competition. When
Yeah.
you lose like this, there's an issue. So to your question, CT, who are we better than? I'm looking at the records right now. The Bulls are 9-13. They've lost the last two. The Hornets are 7-16. They lost their last game. The Pistons are 6-18, and the Magic are 5-18.
Yeah.
I think the question is are we better than the Heat? Are we better than the Wizards?
Mm. And I'm talking about like consistently. I'm not
Hmm.
talking about we could beat any team on any night. I mean,
Yeah,
we just lost to the Bucks. That's what's maddening about
yeah,
this. There's not only is there not consistency, there's the gap between the best and the worst is so far that
yeah,
that's a reflection of the players and coach. I mean, you could talk about how Leon has his own issues, and I fully hear anyone who has or it hasn't been happy with the front office. But
hmm,
when you see inconsistencies in play, like where you can compete with the Bucks, and then you blow a game like this, you blow OKC, you blow a ATL 23-point lead. That's players and coaching. No one
yeah,
else.
yeah,
Because you put yourself in a position to win the ball game, but for somehow the lights got turned off. You know, it's like the power was cut off.
yeah. But that's where I asked the question, and that's why I knew today we were going to be talking about like what is it about this team that makes it so that they can have this kind of loss. To me, there's something about like pride. Like, is it pride? It is. I
Laziness.
late. Is it laziness?
Mhm.
Is it a little bit of arrogance? Like to think like,
Yeah.
we have a stellar first quarter and we're not going to work. We're not going to continue to do like the dirty things. We know that part of it is a talent issue. We do know that. Like I
Yeah.
totally understand that. I'm not delusional to think that
Facts.
the Knicks have the talent to hang in a 7-game series against the Bucks. But when there's a lack of talent, like those other attributes, you have to be committed to them: determination, persistence, aggression, um, not quitting. And that's what was concerning. Um,
Yep.
there was a lot of quit. There was a lot of quit in today's game.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, I'll make this point too. I somehow something makes me feel like whilst they're in front of the camera, they all look like they're tight. You know, it doesn't look like there's any division in the
Hmm.
locker room. But I don't see this squad being like super tight, back in the
Mm.
locker room. I think there's always this report. Julius Randle's a very quietly spoken leader, and there's a lot of people that would like him to be a little bit more vocal. I think
Mhm.
Julius's personality, he's just a chill dude. He's not from New York. He's from Dallas. He's just that kind of guy. He's a chill dude. I think Jalen Brunson came in here to try to be very vocal. He's trying to get people juiced up.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of young players. A lot of people like quickly Obi with there, and Rose and some tightness there. But I just this. We were looking for that leader. Jalen Brunson's come in and try to do his best job, but I still think like we need that talent that everyone in the locker room just respects.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question. There's no question. There is a talent gap. Like if you guys are looking at the rest of the conference, we can go team by team. And if I name a team, you can think of the elite talent on the team or the quasi elite talent. So, for example, with the Celtics, obviously it's Jason Tatum. With the Bucks, you can think of Giannis. With the Cavaliers, you can think of Donovan Mitchell. Like, is Donovan Mitchell super elite, or is he a step below? There's an argument about that. I would probably argue that he's a step below, but there's
Mm.
talent there. With the Hawks, you have Trey, you have DeJounte Murray. You can go team by team by team. The talent that allows them to be within the upper tier of the conference is rather clear. When it comes to our squad, you can go almost player by player. And with our squad, you can kind of quickly go to the deficiencies that emerge with regards to the talent on the team. And that's part of the issue. That's what makes it so frustrating, is that almost every player on our roster has clear and glaring deficiencies that when you combine them together, that's what gets really frustrating. So whether it's, the unwillingness to commit, like to really run out um, on a 3-point shot,
Yeah.
plus
Yeah.
talent or lack of talent, that's where it gets really frustrating. And that's why I think, last point really quickly, that's why I think so many of us as Knicks fans, like if you go into the Knicks Twitter space or if you go into Knicks social media, we're often coming at each other and we're very vitriolic, we're very upset, we're very angry, and everyone, what's up, Pudge? And everyone has like, okay, this is the issue, this is the issue, guys. There are multiple issues. It's not a singular issue. It's a multiplicity of issues. So, yeah, it's a talent issue. It's mismanagement. It's been coaching at times. It's been like, who's coming in? I hope it's some talent coming in. Um, it's been a number of different issues. So
Yeah, no, you hit with that. It's a multitude of things. In terms of this team's biggest issue, in terms of just playing roster, to me, is defense. Obviously,
yeah,
our offense has been pretty decent recently, um, but our offense can still go to another gear, I believe, with better schemes. They're making their most of what we have with Brunson. He's been absolutely fantastic this season. He's been borderline all-star.
yeah,
What will be
yeah,
interesting to see is if we don't make the playoffs, play in, maybe he doesn't become an all-star. We probably have to make the top 8, I think, for
yeah.
him to become an all-star. But yeah, he's had a great first quarter season as a New York Knick. I look forward to seeing him more. He has shortcomings on D. Um, but again, I just don't feel like this is the roster that's going to be together for much longer. I feel like there's going to be some changes, and I think Brunson, RJ with different floor spacing. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Whenever that happens. But um, and you made that great point of how connected they are to Julius. Like, I mean, if Tom's the first one to go, what do you see happening with the roster? Do you think they're still fully committed with Julius? Could you see them just sticking with him for the rest of the season?
That is that's the $1 million question. I think that the first domino to fall will be Thibs. Um, like this actually, like today's game actually brought me back to the year that Van Gundy quit. because he was just so, this is so disappointing. Like I can't give to this. Um, Sorry, an aside. However, um, I think Julius is a complex figure. Um, I think someone made this mention. Like when we had Tim Hardaway Jr., we tried to cast him as a number two to
Yeah,
Porzingis, and he was miscast.
I remember that. Oh,
Y- Julius is somewhat, and I'm being really polite when I say somewhat. Um, Julius is miscast as our number one A, two. Um, so what ends up happening is that I do think that Julius would play an incredible role on another squad. I think the issue that the front office has is not losing a trade or the perception of losing a trade where we get rid of Julius. And that's the
yep.
concern is I do think that they want to move on from Julius. I do think that
Mm,
that's the plan. I also think
yep.
that you don't want to make a bad deal.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And I'm actually thinking, they are still really connected to Julius. I mean, whether you're a fan of that or not, that's just what I think. There's a lot of connections there. They signed him, they gave him the bag. I think they're more likely to move Obi than they are
Hmm.
Julius. If they get a deal that they like for Obi, they would prefer to probably keep Obi and try to move Randle. But I think Obi's probably more likely to get moved. It's a smaller salary. Um,
Hmm.
More likely to get a net positive return, um, and it's just easier for them to keep Julius and say, hey, we invested in him. We're going to try to make this work,
Yeah.
but let's fire the coach first. Like it's fascinating. It's fascinating how to fix this thing because there's not everything is wrong, but not everything is right. There's so many different things to consider with this thing. We can't become a winner overnight. We can't just flip the switch.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
what do you think the front office's biggest regret is? If you're thinking of them right now, do you think this Donovan Mitchell thing? Do you think they just were thinking, we were caught off guard. We should have just done it. Do you think they're just
No.
happy with how that happened?
No, I made this point like I think the night after the Donovan Mitchell trade or the day after the Donovan Mitchell trade. You can't, and I know I'm going to get slammed for this, but you can't be upset about the Donovan Mitchell trade because, again, like I said, um, the price was the same, but the cost was going to be different. Cleveland could afford to move all of those parts
Yep.
because they had a lot more talent. And guys, I love the Knicks. I love the Knicks. I love the orange and blue. Like I incorporate them into what I teach. Um, However, if we had made that deal, Donovan Mitchell probably like the results that we're seeing for Cleveland likely would not have manifested for the Knicks because again, we didn't have talent that was commensurate with what Cleveland has. So,
Exactly. Yep.
and when you throw in the salary implications, when you throw in the salary cap implications, um, I don't know if the front office regrets that move because again, what places us in a somewhat decent position is that some of these contracts are more movable. And so it allows for a little bit more flexibility. Now, I forget who said it. I think JJ talked about this in one of his previous uh, comments. The direction, though, has to be clear. So I think that not making the Donovan Mitchell trade wasn't, at the end of the day, like I think that's the other thing that makes us frustrated as Knicks fans is that we're measuring this season with we could have had Donovan Mitchell in the back of our minds. But again, we have to remember what it would have cost to have Donovan
Oh
Mitchell.
yeah.
Plus, as Kanal mentioned, having Mitchell and Brunson in the backcourt together, again, like
Oof.
we can't play that game. We can't play that game. It didn't happen. And here's the last thing about Donovan Mitchell too, that we from all the reports that we've read, and we spent a lot of the time during the summer talking about this. We don't know if Danny Ainge wanted to trade Donovan Mitchell to the Knicks. And that's the other part of it too. Like, when Donovan Mitchell was doing his introductory press conferences and interviews, he believed that he was going to be traded to the Knicks, but something happened where, and he even said it, like, there are things like that I know. This is Donovan Mitchell who said this. There are things that I know that I can't talk about, but I was surprised that I wasn't traded to the Knicks. So that's why, like, one of the points I keep on raising is that we have to be Knicks fans and we have to love our team, but we also have to remember it that they are part of an entire league, and we can't dictate what happens with the rest of the NBA in as much as we love the Knicks.
Straight facts, It's just it's a building block situation. We've got to be honest with ourselves. And before we get to this big super chat from the one, the only, Jay Boogie, we talked about how this situation with the NBA, you have to be real with yourself, like the San Antonio Spurs were when they traded DeJounte. That's an organization that's knowing where they want to go and understands whether you like that move or not. That's them deciding that we're going to go in this direction. We're going to trade DeJounte, and that's an organization being real with itself. With Julius, with Brunson and RJ, we've seen enough to know we're not going to be a winner with those teams, with those players, and we know we're building with some young players that hopefully improve, but that's not going to be enough. It's just not going to be enough. So what do we do from here? But $20 super chat from Jay Boogie, the Knicks MC, one in the place to be. Shout out to the chat, blessings, health, happiness, right? 1 a.m. tonight, me, Papa Left, and Cully shooting that video at the Rockefeller Center at Times Square. 1 a.m. New York City, pull up for the recording of the anthem back on Christmas. Don't miss. Can't miss.
All right, Jay Boogie.
Salute.
Jay Boogie, shout out to you with all that hot fire, man. So, if you're in the New York City area and I'm going to be up at 1 o'clock in the morning, support our boy Jay Boogie with that hot fire. Yes. Shout out to Geraldine, by the way, too, and JJ and Eddie in the chat. Eddie, the question is like about patience, and one of the things, again, and you were talking about this before, every season has a mind of its own. We can't just build and make Tariq, yes, you can't just make moves because you get emotional. It has to be logical. It has to be against the backdrop of what's happening in the league. And I'm sorry, Giannis is going to dominate this conference for the next few years. There are questions about his supporting cast. Like, for example, Chris Middleton. Chris Middleton seems to get injured very often. So perhaps in 2 years, if we are smart, if we build, I don't know, whether through the trade market or through drafting, maybe that's a possibility. Again, I want to make moves that make sense. I want to make moves that keeps us relevant, but I also don't want to make moves that are emotional and don't really have a long-term vision with multiple possibilities.
Now that we're still in the play-in situation, but going into this season, Chat and EJ, what did you hope to get out of this season the most? Whether it was just RJ becomes an all-star, Obi becomes a legit starting four, and they trade Julius. What was the top thing you were hoped to get out of this season? Because it could still be salvageable. It may not have been about wins and losses. Whatever you hope to get out of this season, I'm interested to hear from you.
Well, part of it, what we wanted to get out of this season is clarity as to what Jalen Brunson is. I think that's been probably the biggest win we've had so far this year. The biggest win we've had so far this year is Jalen Brunson, with regards to the question as to what he is. Can he be a legitimate starting point guard? I don't think that's debatable anymore. I think that in terms of leading this team for the next few years, whether it's for the entirety of the contract or whether it's for a portion of the contract, I think it's pretty clear that that's been a pretty good pickup. And by the
Yeah.
way, you know what I love about Knicks Buzz? I'm feeling that even after a horrible loss, I love the love that's in the chat right now. It's making me feel better about what's happened. Um,
In fact, so we go through this together. We're one
exactly. This is
one
like support.
one big family. Even if our opinions differ and our what we're seeing looks different,
Yeah,
we all want to get to that same end of the road. With
absolutely.
that Larry O'Brien.
Yeah. I think the other answer to your question, CT, is I think that a lot of people are disappointed with regards to where RJ is in terms of his development. I think the complexity, though, about RJ's season is that once we added Jalen Brunson and you have three left-handed ball dominant players, it added a complexity that makes figuring out what's happening with RJ even more difficult. Um,
Yeah.
so if Julius is moved, before the trading deadline, if Julius is moved at some point, do we see a different RJ? That's the stuff we don't know. Um, so I guess that's frustrating. But the other thing that we wanted to see, a portion of the fan base wanted to see, were the kids. We're seeing the kids. When you do see the kids, though, and this is the other piece of it, when we're seeing younger players like Obi play, when we see an IQ play, when we see a Grimes play, when we see a Cam play, there are going to be moments where we're very happy and we're going to be like, oh my gosh, we have so much potential. And there's going to be moments of frustrations. That's what young players do as well. So that's the other piece of this that we have to remember, is that some of us wanted the kids to play. There's probably a likelihood, given what we saw today, we're going to see even more of the kids.
Yeah.
We're going to have these moments.
Yeah. Some things, and we talked about it last night. There's been some things I've been really pleased about, which is younger players getting a bigger role than what was anticipated. So that's been a tick for me. It wasn't about the wins and losses, but unfortunately, the first quarter of the season hasn't made me feel much better about the future of these young players. There's been nice improvements from a few of them, but
Hmm.
I'm really looking for the Knicks to grab that difference maker. And being real, we don't really have that right now. It's Jalen
Yeah.
Brunson, and I don't see anyone else on this roster that's a difference maker. Um, Outside of maybe Cam Reddish, Quentin Grimes, and Obi Toppin, RJ could play nice, maybe starting complementary roles. That's nice. You need those players, but you can supplement a great roster with those players later. You need the stars first
Yeah.
to build around. You need to find that. If we're in the middle and we're not drafting low enough to grab those stars, then how else do we get one? Um, we're just going to have to trade all these assets and look for the person who does become available. Um,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
what's
You.
crazy is the New Orleans Pelicans may end up with the top 2 pick, the Lakers selection, and to add to that, the young talent that they've already got right now. That's how stacked of assets some of these teams are. The Houston Rockets could end up with Victor Wembanyama with the crazy young talent they've got. Orlando could end up with him.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you hit the nail on the head, and that's one of the things. Like when I was like pacing around in my place today watching the game, one of the things I have to remember is the best player on the court. Actually, let me rephrase this: the most talented player on the court had a Dallas uniform on.
Yep.
And so like that's part of the frustration of the NBA is most nights when we are watching these games, the most talented player is going to be wearing the opposing uniform. Um, if it's Giannis, if it's Shea Gilgeous Alexander, if it's tomorrow night, like I mean, like probably the best 2, 3 players on the court tomorrow might be wearing Cleveland jerseys. And that's what's difficult about the NBA is if you don't have that transcendent or near transcendent talent, you might have moments of frustration. And I think that's part of what happened is that The Knicks don't have that player that can create amazing offense and to get incredibly hot and to draw the defense to get foul calls. I mean, there were calls that we've seen in the last few games where it's like, oh my gosh, that's a superstar call. We don't have a superstar, and this is, and since the days of David Stern, this has been a
Yep.
superstar driven league. And um, my boy Mark Berman used to say, like, if we want to be totally critical and honest and nuanced about all of this, the Knicks they've drafted poorly, yes, but they've also had bad luck in some of these drafts, and that we've almost never moved up to be in the position to draft the best player or the second best player in some of these drafts in the past 10, 20 years.
Yeah. And you just got to be smart, drafting the
Yeah.
right guy. Like I said last night, you don't need to be top 5 all the time to get that difference maker.
Hmm.
Like I said, I really feel like the Knicks are in this position because they whiffed on the Ntilikina Knox drafts.
Yeah.
Look at who was available: Donovan Mitchell, SGA, Mikal Bridges, that the Knicks could have grabbed were passed them up. So,
Yeah.
and this draft is the most deepest in decades. So we'll be doing heaps of draft talk later, but we can definitely get a difference maker in the teens. If those drafts had a difference maker in the teens, then this draft is going to have a difference maker. But we're going to have to need the right selections and the right people, making these picks that fit the roster. Don't take another power forward if Obi and Randle's on the roster, so they can be situational. Don't take another lead starting point guard that you hope could be a starting point guard if you're already paying Jalen Brunson. Maybe this is the year they need to pick on need.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if you land the number 1 pick, you grab whoever, or the top 3, you grab whoever, and you figure it out. But if you're paying Jalen Brunson, it's going to come back to bite you if you keep signing these signings and then you pick a player in the same position.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. Like I think every person who's a Knicks fan has realized there's a lot of redundancies on the squad. There are, um, there are players who have similar types. There are players who we're not quite sure what their role is, or if they're playing out of position. So, for example, RJ, like, is RJ playing out of position? Is RJ
Mm.
really a 3? Is RJ, he doesn't shoot well enough often to play a 2? Who do we ask him to defend? And
Facts.
so that's part of it as well. Like, we have a roster that is, and I keep on saying it, it's incomplete, and it's not fully fleshed out in ways where you can avoid having repetition of roles, or like clearly laid out and identified and articulated roles. So this is part of the frustration that we get. So I would hope, and I will be something I will declare today. I do hope that if we do draft in this 2023 draft, that we do draft based upon need, and we start to consolidate, as John Smelt mentioned last night, that we start to consolidate some of these positions. And it's going to lead, and here's the thing we have to accept, it's going to lead to some very difficult decisions. Some of our favorite role players might be gone, either at the trade deadline or next season, because of how much repetition and overlap there are in terms of roles.
Yeah, absolutely, facts, right? Scouting is really critical as well. Understanding these players' tendencies, like their ceiling, drafting with the ceiling. Obviously, the Knox thing didn't work out, but like Dirty said, the Knicks had that intention to swing for the fence in that draft.
Hmm.
It was just unfortunate. It was the wrong one. I
Yeah.
really feel like Phil Jackson went the safe route with Ntilikina. He thought
Yeah.
Ntilikina was just your Ron Harper, your tall starting point guard. Wasn't flashy, came with experience overseas. I think he went safe with Ntilikina, even though he was a project. But the Knox one, they hoped that he was like the next prototypical star wing, KD with a great jump shot because he was so young. I think Kevin Knox was the youngest selected player, was definitely the youngest player in the NBA in his rookie year. He was super raw.
Yeah.
Had a great summer league, had a great first up season. And then what did they do? They signed Marcus Morris and Bobby Portis as well. But it's more who they passed up on. You know, we just can't afford to do that no more. If we trade out of the pick, it must be for something that's beneficial for the future. And if we make the selection, it better be a player that's going to stick around. We re-signed Kevin Knox, RJ Barrett. We re-signed Mitchell Robinson. That was monumental because those were players we drafted.
Mm-hmm.
We were desperately hoping that they turned out to be a difference maker. They turn out to be a difference maker for us because we drafted them and we've paid them now. We've extended them as well. So if anyone wants to be as critical with this organization, you could probably start with the drafting.
Yeah.
That's something in your hands. You can select whoever you want, you know.
You know, the Kevin Knox, as I'm looking at the stats right now, the Kevin Knox drafting in 2018, I remember being really in tune with that draft and John Calipari saying over and over and over again that Kevin Knox is young. Every interview that John Calipari did, because he's a Kentucky kid.
Yep.
Every interview he said, you're going to have to wait. You're going to have to wait. You're going to have to wait. He's raw. He has a lot of potential. The thing about Kevin Knox is, was he under the right administration? Was he under the right program at that point during the Knicks, in Knicks history, to develop? And so one of the things that we have to remember is that a lot of these decisions that, you know, Leon Rose inherited were decisions that weren't part of his administration. And so if we can't relitigate it. Like it's a decision that happened before he came on board. And because it happened before he came on board, if you watch a lot of sports, you already know that GMs and team presidents aren't always in love with the previous administration's decisions. They're trying to create a canvas that's exclusively their own. But because of contracts, because of salary caps, because of draft picks, it's sometimes difficult. Kevin Knox might become the second coming of Dennis Smith Jr., where if he sticks around long enough, in 2 years, he might be a serviceable player. But the thing we can't do is then go back and say, oh, we should have kept on. That was an administration before Leon Rose. But to your point, I do think, and Dirty Dancer mentioned this before, we've seen the Knicks do a lot of trading back. But part of the issue is that we haven't had clarity as to what the plan was. And maybe the honest reality is that bubble season really derailed what the plan was supposed to be. The fact that we got we were in the fourth position derailed what the plan might have been. And all of a sudden, instead of having a development plan, instead of having this, okay, this is going to be a difficult 4 or 5 years, but we know where we're going. And then all of a sudden the pandemic takes place, the bubble season takes place, we hit the 4th seed. That might have clouded, because that's where we re-signed Julius. That's where, you know, we have the Kemba and Evan Fournier moves. That's where when we're drafting, all of a sudden we start deciding to move back instead of being more aggressive. So I would hope that there's more clarity in terms of the long-term vision and saying, okay, this is clearly not a team that can compete at a high level. So we're going to draft. We're going to make moves according to a longer-term vision as opposed to what we have right now.
Yeah, my hope moving forward, you made great points about pre-Leon and now Leon. Leon's the guy in the seat. He's got to fix this thing. Where would I start if I'm Leon? Be 100% real with where you're at right now. You got all these teams, and some of the teams are on the screen now that we're about to face, and we'll chop that up. later in the show, but the whole NBA is changing around the Knicks right now. You're always focused on yourself, but then all these other teams around you are acquiring talent, and you can be left behind in a hurry. So be 100% real with where you're at. Make the most of this season by playing the young players, seeing what you've got with them, make moves around that, see what you can do at the deadline, see if there's offers that make sense, do some things in the off season, and just build it slowly. Don't have no expectations to make the play-in playoffs. Use your draft picks. We must acquire young talent with these draft picks. This draft is going to be insane. The next few drafts are going to be great. The best thing going for the Knicks right now is their flexibility with these picks. If we save them because we didn't want to give them all up for Donovan Mitchell, well, then you better use them. If this front office, if they're undoing maybe this Donovan Mitchell deal because they didn't do the deal, and then now they've got these picks. So now they're holding a grenade, basically, and they've got to do something with it. They're going to have to find the right talent with that, make the right trade with those picks, and do something. Because, Jalen Brunson's in the middle of his career. Julius Randle's in the middle of his career. Their timeline's going to continue, but we need to figure something out for the future.
Yeah. And here's the thing too, like the draft picks, again, at least this is where I am right now. Understanding the Knicks through the context of other teams throughout the league. The Knicks aren't the only team with a slew of draft picks over the next few years.
Oh, yeah.
So it's important for us to remember that, and for the front office to remember that as well, is that if they're going to make a bold decision, whatever the bold decision is they have to remember OKC has a ton of draft picks. They can't draft all of those picks. Utah has a ton of draft picks. They can't draft all of those picks. So that's what we mean in terms of and I really, really, really hope that this point is really clear, is that you have to understand the Knicks relative to everyone else as well too, is that if they don't have a clear vision in terms of what they want to be in the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, those draft picks are a grenade, and it's either going to blow up the rest of the league or it's going to blow up in your face. And so there has to be clarity in terms of what the vision is. There has to be clarity in terms of what do we foresee Julius being in the next 2 years, 3 years? Is Julius going to still be part of this organization in 2, 3 years, so that we're drafting or we're moving or trading according to our long-term vision? So there's the potential for us to make an aggressive move, but at the same time, I don't want it to be a silly, impetuous, emotional, reactionary decision.
Yeah, it's going to be like Leon has got a lot of pressure on him too. There's obviously the Tom Thibodeau situation, but Leon's made some moves that would have Dolan, in my opinion, questioning, okay, where is this thing going now? Because you think of yourself as Dolan, right? You look at the dollar figures, the decimals, and you're paying quite a few guys now to be the 10th team, the 9th team. Yeah. Even a guy that doesn't know much about basketball, if you know numbers, you're going to be like, well, what am I kind of getting here for my buck? We traded out of the draft last one. I was okay with it because we addressed our biggest need, which was the point guard situation. And there's been some nice players come out so far. Tari Eason, AJ Griffin's had a few nice games. Johnny Davis has struggled. But whatever happens with last draft, I'm okay, because we have our potential all-star and point guard of the future. And we did what we had to do to get that. But now this draft, I'm really evaluating the Leon Rose success regime with this draft now, and these picks we're going to have. I don't think we're going to finish much above 8 or 9 at the highest, EJ. So,
no.
And if we don't make the play-in, if we lose the play-in game, the pick falls back to the lottery. So we're going to be selecting in that 10 to 15 range, and we may have multiple picks in that range. And I really feel like we can seriously address some talent deficiencies, some needs, and just be real with ourselves for the rest of the season. If we keep Julius and we can't trade him, fair enough. Play him 28 minutes. Play him 27 minutes. Don't treat him like he is an MVP All-Star kind of guy, right? He realistically is a third option on a winning team, right?
Yeah.
But we continue to do teams, players, coaches favors when it's not the best thing for us,
You said you just preached a sermon right there. It's why it can be concerning. And if you are a Knicks fan and you're frustrated, I'm with you. I'm frustrated. I do believe there's some hope, but there has to be a come to Jesus, like, clarity moment. Like, what are we?
Yeah.
We're not championship contenders. We're not even close. But how can we position ourselves to be one? Dirty Dancer, shout out to you. Says OKC and New Orleans can beat us on any trade. In reality, yes, they can. But that's where, again, I was saying that if we're going to make a move, it has to be shrewd, it has to be calculated, and it has to be focused and in alignment with a clear vision. And at the same time, like, one of my hopes for this season was that we actually were making moves that improved the value of certain players so that we could move on from those players and move on from those contracts. Because we are in that weird position. Like, if you make another trade and you're trading, you can't just, one of the weird things about the league, and, there are a lot of rules about like how you can trade and what you can trade. And sometimes as fans, we forget that. Like, for example, if you're going to trade Julius, you have to trade within a certain percentage of his contract. So we don't want to necessarily trade Julius and get a worse contract or a worse player that has less value for subsequent moves. So that's really my concern, is that there has to be an ability for the team to articulate, at least in-house, because they're not going to do it in the press, at least in-house, what the clarity of vision is, and so that they're moving with regards to that particular vision.
Yeah, you made that great point about Julius. Like, I would never, as much as we may be stuck with him or be frustrated with that, with the Obi situation, don't trade Julius by moving on an asset. Right? Keep him. There will be a team that needs a player like him, definitely, at some point. He's not a bad player. He's in the wrong role for the New York Knicks.
Absolutely.
And while we've got him, if we're losing, then we just go with that. We're in the lottery. Keep building with that. You can't just trade picks to get off of Julius. I think that I wouldn't do that. If it's just second round picks, maybe I think about it. And I know the Obi situation is there, but like I said, play Julius less minutes. The end goal should be to try to trade Julius eventually, but I would not try to move on from any picks just to do that. But out of any player, out of Fournier and him, they're the first few that I would love to see go. With that, to make a financial decision on Obi, how can you possibly make an educated decision when you haven't even seen him play 32 minutes for a month straight? Right? This is a player you drafted with the 8th pick, and he's been in your system for 3-4 years, and you're going to have to make a financial decision, and you haven't seen him play more than 32 minutes for a long stretch. So how could you possibly make an educated decision financially? So that's what has me thinking that he's most likely to be traded.
That's why it's so complex. That's why it's so complex. And that's why, like, I think, from our perspective, you're absolutely right, CT, that it would make sense, and Pudge, that's reasonable. It would make sense to trade Randle because, again, the finances and the business of the league make it such that at some point, and we're now there. When a few years ago, last year, we could talk about Obi and talk about the potential of having to play him 20, 30 minutes. We're now at the point where we have to play him 20 or 30 minutes to figure out, what is this contract going to be? Because if you're going to move on from Obi, even if you have no desire to re-sign Obi and you want to move on from him, you have to play Obi to increase his value to see what he actually is, because you don't want to trade Obi 50 cents on the dollar. This is at the point where if you want to improve, it's about talent acquisition or asset acquisition. And that's where we are right now. It's either about talent acquisition or asset acquisition. And the only conceivable way it seems for the Knicks to really want to commit to playing Obi is Julius has to go. So this is the conundrum right now, is how do we move Randle without including assets, but getting back assets? And at the same time, how do we get to the point where we have this ability to consolidate some of these players that are mismatched or playing roles that are not necessarily best for this particular organization?
Yeah, and I think there's a combination of things with Eddie's point with Randle. I think there's a lot of things, like there's a little bit of optics. He was the first guy you extended. You gave him a big contract. He's CAA. There's a history there. He balled out. I think there's some loyalty to Julius, which is why they're a bit hesitant with optics. There is a little bit of optics in terms of moving on from him by all means necessary. I just don't think that's what Leon Rose wants to do. He'd rather him stay on the roster and us just lose, I think, and then we end up with a higher pick than just give Julius away. But to Eddie's point also, should be teams that would need Randle's help. I just don't think they're looking hard enough. I don't really think that they're pushing for a Randle trade right now as hard as what they could be. And maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe in 15 more games, when we get closer to the period, we'll hear some buzz about that. We heard a little bit of buzz last season, but it just wasn't really like that loud about Julius, was it? There was just didn't seem to be any market for him.
Yeah, and it's also because, again, like when you look at the rest of the league and Pudge looked at what were the teams that need a Julius or Julius-like player. I think that's part of what's happening right now. Like, again, like we're just getting past the quarter mark of the season. We're just getting past, Utah. All of us, looking at Utah's record for the first 20 games and thinking, first 10 games rather, and Utah having a sensational start. And now all of a sudden they're kind of falling back to where the prognosticators believe they were going to be. So right now, for example, Utah's 14-11. They're slightly above 500. So this is the point where teams start to become what they're likely going to become for the rest of the season. And that's where they start to evaluate what their realistic needs are. And perhaps this is where we start hearing more of the conversation as to, okay, this team sees Julius as being a potential solution for this particular issue. Many of us saw Phoenix and we're like, okay, they need a Julius. Many of us saw that Dallas, for example, even before the season, many of us thought that Dallas would be an ideal location. But I think that the other teams might start to materialize within the next 10 games where they start to realize, okay, we don't have enough offense, for example. And I'm not saying this is a possible destination, but Miami is a weird place right now as a team. If you look at their record, I'm going to quickly look this up. Miami is 11-12. What moves can a Miami make? Because with Jimmy Butler wants to win.
Absolutely. Pat Riley wants to
win. And Pat Riley's getting older. Can't believe it, but he looks amazing, but he's getting older. So we're at this point where teams that are within the 6 to 8 range or the 4 to 8 range might start to consider what moves can we make. Same thing with the Lakers. You guys know I talk about the Lakers all the time. Dallas, these are teams, the Raptors. These are teams that they fancy themselves as being somewhat contenders, but they might be a move or two away. And that's where Julius's market will start to bubble and start to percolate.
Yeah, great point. So you got to see around the league. There's teams that, and again, I really feel like Randle can help a lot of teams. You know what I mean? I'm not just throwing Randle away because he's trash. He's not. He's a player with flaws. Like A lot of players got flaws. But if you're building the Knicks, right, you've got to be ruthless. It's not attack on no player's personality. It's not none of that. You've just got to be smart. That's why you call yourself a general manager. You've got to manage your personnel. You've got to manage your players, manage your payroll. You've got to manage everything. Are we going in the right direction? And I agree, fans do need to practice patience. We have been patient a long time. And most fans just are happy with us going in a clear-cut direction.
Yeah.
Like you raised that great point, and I'll keep quoting you. If Leon Rose just spoke and said, "Yeah, this is what we really intend to do," and I know we can hear a few sound bites from his talk that they want to develop young players and they want to try to build and they want to win games, but that's tough in the league. That's tough to do. And Andrew's great point: the Indiana Pacers, right, rebuilt, or their rebuild got boosted in less than 2 seasons.
Yeah.
With a foundational backcourt. I'm happy with our one addition in the backcourt, but we do need to surround him with better NBA talent.
Yeah. To Tariq's point, not interested in helping other teams. Yeah, Tariq, my guy, that's the point that I was talking about yesterday. Like, I'm not saying we're improving other teams. It's about, like, again, like, there are only 3 ways, and I'm just talking extemporaneously right now, so I haven't really thought about this point, but I'm going to try to make sure this point makes sense. The only 3 ways a team can improve is either by drafting, internal player development, for example, or 4 ways: drafting, internal development of players that are drafted, signing someone, or trading for someone. We all know that in this league, like, some of the best teams have had to make some sort of trade to improve their roster. So
shake
at
things
some
up a bit.
to shake things up. So, like, almost all of the contending teams at some point had to make some sort of trade. So the Celtics, for example, who are like top of the East at this point, that's a result of that infamous Brooklyn Nets trade. The KG trade, the what's his name, Paul Pierce trade. You have to be aware of what's happening with other teams, because they might inadvertently, without knowing it, because of their own weaknesses, because of their own challenges, be in the position to help you. So even if, like, we don't want to get rid of Randle, we still have to do business with other teams. So, like, for example, was Utah ever going to trade Donovan Mitchell to the Knicks? They looked at our roster and said, okay, what can we get from them that will help us? And that's part of the business of the league. So unless we just want to exclusively draft players and sign free agents, that's a part of the business as well. So, and that's why I said, like, this season, this off season on this trade deadline is going to be difficult, because some of our favorite players will likely be going, and it might be Randle, it might be Obi, it might be IQ, because the roster has to start to consolidate, because we have too many draft picks, we have too many players that are redundant, and this is going to be the challenge.
Yeah, I think it's a business first and foremost. Like I said, you can't let if you're running a team, you can't let feelings and connections and emotions be the sole thing that dictates everything. Like, because the NBA, like we saw with Tim Hardaway, players cop feelings, but GMs can't cop feelings.
Yeah.
We traded Tim and we signed him when it was a business decision, and we let him go when it was a business decision, kind of thing. Happy for him, and he got paid and stuff. He hasn't exactly been consistent with Dallas. But yeah, I'm looking for players that are consistent. Basically, we know Randle has talent. He could go off on any night. RJ Barrett can go off on any night. What this is about is I'm looking for talent that can produce on the regular, kind of thing. We look at a lot of other teams around the league, and they have players that produce on the regular, and kind of thing. yes, the players are mostly to blame more than the coach, but the coach is going to be the one that goes first, I think, just because
Yeah.
you can't get rid of all your players. So who do you keep around and try to build around? I agree with most of the chat saying, you rock out with Jalen Brunson. He's only 26 years old. You have some really bright young pieces. You keep Julius until something makes sense, but you stay on the Obi, quickly watch, and if you could quickly cash in an asset like a first round pick, not that I would be not that I would be in love with that, but it's better than losing them for nothing. Basically, look what the
Yeah.
Dallas Mavericks did. They lost Jalen Brunson for nothing, and if it's a sad day that if you lose an Obi or quickly, if you were to get a first round pick back for them, then that ain't the worst thing. You just got to continue to look ahead, recycle this situation. But I do feel like there will be a lot of trade suitors for those kind of guys. Jericho Sims, Obi quickly. There'll be a lot of teams looking for that young talent if they could be had for reasonably cheap. Like a late first round pick.
Yeah, and that's the business of the league too. Like, I mean, that's like, and I'm no contract expert. I'm no NBA trade rules expert, but that's part of it. Is that at some point, like when you have IQ's contract coming up, when Obi's contract's coming up, and there's a salary cap, that's the reality of it. Like, these aren't like, we're not necessarily saying that we want to trade these players, but the reality is that given the contracts, some tough decisions are going to have to be made. And, whether it's Julius, whether it's Obi, because again, there's going to have to be some sort of contract extension that's going to happen. But,
Yeah.
the other reality is, the other realistic point is that this is not a championship level roster. It's not it's not even close. And I said this last night, this is not the Mighty Ducks. There's no coach that's going to walk in and give, like, a flying V or a speech, and then all of a sudden Isaiah Hartenstein is going to become, Kevin McHale. Um, Julius Randle is not going to become Magic. Like, these players and we can love them, but they're not as good as Jason Tatum, Jalen Brown. They're not as good as Kevin Durant. They're not as good as, most of the top tier players. Like, I guess, all right, I'm going to finish with this. In the chat, Silver Surfer is hilarious. He said, trade Randall for Air Bud. In the chat,
Oh
if you,
man.
can you guys do me a favor and tell me who's the Knicks' best player, and where in the league would you rank that player in terms of like top whatever? So, like, for example, if you believe it's Julius Randle, he is the 37th best player. If you believe it's Jalen Brunson, do you think he's like the 25th best player in the league? So just do me a favor, and just, if we can do that just for a second, who's the Knicks' best player and where do they rank in the league? Because I think that's what we're talking about, is that unless we have a player who's in the top 20, we're gonna continue to be frustrated.
Yeah. I think what a lot of people have really misunderstood as well is how tough the league got real recently, like the East
Yeah,
in particular, the East in particular. Like, we are a pretty solid roster, and in maybe many years past, we could finish, this roster would be good enough to get you in the 5 to 6 seed. Remember those years when you only needed to be 3 games over 500, and that
mm-hmm.
would have you in 6th or 5th, and then like 3 games below 500 would still have you in 8th. Those years are gone,
Yeah,
ladies and
yeah, yeah,
gentlemen. In the
yeah,
East, the East is like the new West,
yeah,
and the West is still a wild West. So,
yeah,
with that said, you need to be even more prudent with your talent and say, are these guys going to get us to where we need to? I want to, say something positive too, because Knicks fans that may be feeling really down right now and feeling like we're an eternity away from getting there. I really feel like things can be turned around quicker than you think. Look no further than the Indiana Pacers, things like that, right? You be real with yourself. You draft well. In a couple of years, you can become real attractive. I really feel that. But you have to make honest assessments with where you're at, you know, and make prudent decisions financially. You know, people was talking about. I think Dirty was saying time to be prudent with Mitch. Maybe was the time to be with Mitch a year ago. The Fournier situation, the Rose one. I'm glad those contracts are coming to an end, but that money wasn't exactly really well spent. So, and we're paying a lot of money now between Mitch, RJ, Randle, and Brunson. So we better find low end salary, high talent in the draft to supplement those higher salaries, right? Rookie scale contracts that outplay their contract.
Can I give a shout out to Tom from Huntington? Clyde is our best player, top 10. That's what I was laughing at. That was really hysterical. I like that. That was really good.
Facts. No, in all honesty, Jalen Brunson could be what, I don't know, top 30.
Yeah, I put him around top 30.
Julius is obviously top 50 still. And those guys aren't easy to get, like top 15 guy, top 20 guy. We had the chance to get one, Donovan Mitchell, and we valued the picks more than apparently. We'll still never know. Maybe Danny Ainge just would never have done it anyway. He was happy with the Cleveland offer, and that was a great offer. You know?
Yeah, it was, and that's why I keep on saying, like, the complexity of that Donovan Mitchell trade. Like, I think if Donovan Mitchell was never a conversation this offseason, I do believe that many of us would view this season differently. We would still be frustrated, but many of us keep on going back to, well, we should have traded for Donovan Mitchell, when in reality, we don't know if that was ever a possibility. Danny Ainge was under no obligation to ever trade him to the New York Knicks. If he's decided it's like, how often do the Knicks and the Nets trade? Like, let's just think about this. If we're going to be logical Knicks fans right now, how often do the Knicks and Nets trade? There's no rule saying that, because the Nets are in Brooklyn, and because they're 718, and because the Knicks are in Manhattan and they're 212, they are not allowed to trade because they're too close to one another. There's no rule that stipulates that. But because of the politics of basketball, because of competing fan bases, they pretty much don't trade with one another. Yeah. That is possible, and there's nothing you can do to force the Nets. Yeah. And they won't
confirm that.
Yeah, they're not going to do it.
Bobby Marks was in the New Jersey front office. He said that was a real thing. We would never trade with the New York Knicks.
Yeah, and that's just reality. It's just reality. There are teams that won't do business with one another, whether for personal reasons, whether for business reasons, whether for optics. I mean, the Brooklyn Knicks thing is an optics thing. It's we don't want to trade with one another, because if one of us loses this deal, it might theoretically crater the fan base. So when we apply that logic to the Utah situation, I don't think that Danny Ainge wanted to possibly, we don't know, but possibly he didn't want to trade Donovan Mitchell, his superstar, to a team of his desire, because it's a small market team. And if you do grab another superstar, you don't want to be in that position to where you're possibly losing another superstar who decides, I don't want to play in this small market. So that's the complexity of it. We have to kind of understand Donovan Mitchell and put that in a bubble and understand all of the nuances of it, and then come to the reality of what this season is. We don't have Donovan Mitchell, nor do we have a top 10, a top 15 talent on this team.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not mad. I echo Kaiser's point about the Donovan Mitchell thing. It would have been great to see him as a New York Knick and light up the Garden, and it's going to be tough when he comes in today. But realistically, if Mitchell's on this team, like with this stacked East and where the NBA is with the Celtics and that, do we really get over the top? And then what happens if we flame out in 3 years? We've given up all our picks. was Donovan Mitchell that guy to put us over the top? I think our timeline is seriously a lot longer than that. We need to go really young and just start afresh. With these assets, we have a great head start if we just keep drafting, keep using these picks, and land a few stars in the draft, and then you supplement that with a star that chooses you in free agency. Like let's say, not saying this is the guy I really want. I'm just using this as an example. But let's say we draft a few nice players that come up on the come up real fast, and then LaMelo Ball, chooses the Knicks as a free agent. That's where you're, in a position to build successfully because you've drafted well, and then a free agent signs with you. You don't have to give up assets to get him. That's why the Golden State Warriors was able to create a dynasty. They didn't have to really give anything up. If anything, they were able to trade Monte Ellis and get that center Bogut that they needed. They already had Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, which they drafted. And then that's their dynasty.
Yeah.
Long-term successful winning. The San Antonio Spurs, they drafted David Robinson, Sean Elliott, Manu Ginobili. That's their dynasty.
Yeah. Yeah.
How many teams have a dynasty that trade for a star? And the Miami Heat's probably one of the outliers. The Kawhi Leonard was a one night stand. How many long-term dynasties have been formed from trading for a player?
That's the model. I think that's the issue. And I don't know. I think that we are in a spot right now where a lot of us are just frustrated because we know that in May and June, the season's going to be over, and we're not going to be in the position to make, we're not in the position to make one move that's going to vault us into serious playoff competition or serious championship contender status.
Yep.
We had the same issue during the Melo years. The Melo years, we rushed the process. We traded for Melo, and obviously there are guys. I know. There are mitigating circumstances because Amari was injured. But even signing Amari to a certain extent, there's a reason why Phoenix was like, we're not going to necessarily resign you because we know that your knees are going to wear out at some point. And I love Amari. Amari is like one of my favorite Knicks. But long story short, there isn't a singular move we can make right now that will all of a sudden make us, have a parade in the Canyon of Heroes next week or in June. It's not going to happen. And that's why we're so frustrated. That's why we want to fire Dolan. We want to fire Tibbs. We want to fire Leon. We want to trade everyone. There's not a single move. And this is, at this point, this is therapy. We're all Knicks fans. We love one another for the most part. And we're just venting right now. And we're trying to find plausible solutions. But at this point, it's going to take a lot of everything.
Yeah, I think ultimately the mistakes we're made is we've sacrificed long-term success for short-term gain. Basically, short-term gratification, short-term gain. And honestly, yeah, the Melo situation was fair. That was the right situation to try to go all in, I guess. Melo, Chandler, you obviously messed up by getting Chandler. And amnesting Billups. You could have had CP3 mostly. That was a time when it's okay. You try and go all in. You have a top 10 player on your roster in the league, kind of thing. But the Knicks haven't been close since then. The Knicks haven't really had a talent like Melo since then. For as flawed as he was from New York and he demanded that trade. That was quite a rare situation.
But bro, sorry to cut you off. But the difference is too with Melo was, and we would have to go back to like 2010, 2011. Melo was a top 10 talent, or at the very least a top 15 talent.
Yep.
And he was an available. That's the other big difference too. He was an available top 10, top 15 talent. I don't know if there's anyone who's available who's a top 10, top 15 talent at this moment.
It's tough, super. And even Melo didn't want to wait till free agency to choose the Knicks. We
Yeah.
still had to give up assets to get a guy that was a hometown hero, you know, hometown guy. Even he didn't just choose the Knicks and say, I just want to go there as a free agent. I think finances was involved because he wanted that the security of the extension earlier. But
Yes.
that was tough. Like when as just a star free agent just signed for the Knicks, Jalen Brunson's been the best player that has just signed with us in a long, long time since Amari, I think.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's 12 years ago. 2010.
2010. Yeah.
When Amari said the Knicks are back. And even then it was mitigating circumstances because we were giving him the uninsured contract.
Exactly.
It's
And
like,
that's the complexity.
yeah, man. We'll get out of here in a minute. Let's just have a quick look at the road ahead. What do you think of? What are your initial thoughts when you see Cleveland, Atlanta, Charlotte, Sacramento, and the Bulls?
Oh boy. I'm saying this right now because I'm in my feelings, and I usually try to be incredibly analytical. But to quote Rocky 3, and this is a joke. This is a joke, but it's not a joke. What's my prediction? Pain. Um, if you know Rocky 3, you know the quote. Yeah, we could play that game. Like, like Cleveland, I think is a loss. The Hawks, I think, is probably going to be a loss, and the Hornets, because we're going to be playing in Charlotte. I don't know. I guess my prediction is this: if the Knicks lose Cleveland and at the Atlanta game is big. The Atlanta game is big.
Oh,
Trey
that is
Young, you know where I'm
ice
going with this.
cold young.
Yeah, if Trey Young has a Trey Young a la Reggie Miller game where he is embarrassing the Knicks, and does a bow in the middle of center court on the logo, it is quite conceivable that that's where Tibbs gets fired so that they start off with a new regime or a new interim head coach, playing in Cleveland, because Cleveland, you might want to, if you're gonna fire Tibbs, you want to give that new coach an opportunity to win their first game.
Yep.
And playing against
Exactly.
Charlotte conceivably on a Friday night might be like a palate cleanser. So the next two games are really big.
Yeah, great points. And also maybe they want to wait closer to the trade deadline too. That's a factor. Like,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, Knicks Nation, Knicks Streets. I wouldn't be surprised if we wake up tomorrow and Thibodeau's gone. But if I'm making a guess, I think he survives a little bit longer. I think his seat's flaming hot, but I don't think he might be let go tomorrow. I won't be shocked, but I think it could be closer to the deadline or after then. Because maybe they would just want to see if we can do a roster shake up before letting him go. Who knows? But I was thinking this myself. Remember when we had interim coach Mike Miller?
Yeah.
Not the 3-point shooting marksman Mike Miller, but Knicks GOAT Mike Miller. This is where I'm at with Tom Thibodeau. I wouldn't mind. I think Mike Miller did a great job when he took over the Knicks. Nothing flashy. He just had us playing man-to-man defense, passing the ball. It was just consistent. I'm just not seeing consistent play.
Yeah, it's very inconsistent. And I think that's why the next two games are going to be really important, because the next two games, and you said this earlier tonight, is the issue will be how we lose. I think it's pretty evident, particularly how, when we look at the roster construction of Cleveland, it sets up to be somewhat analogous to what transpired against Milwaukee, where you have really long players. You have, players like a Jared Allen who usually plays a stellar defense, who's a block shot machine. And when you have that kind of player, it seems this season that there tends to be fear going into the lane. You have the potential of Donovan Mitchell coming in and saying, okay, I want to be a star right now and put on a show. So if it's a blowout, which would then amount to 2 blowouts in a row, and you have the chorus of boos cascading down from the 300s, that's when it kind of forces, even if Leon Rose, and I forget who mentioned that Leon Rose may not want to fire Tibbs, if you start to hear that chorus of boos, we also know that Dolan, for the most part, he has moments where he can be tempered, but then he has moments where it's like he does not like to be antagonized at Madison Square Garden. See Charles Oakley, see fire Dolan, see protest outside of Madison Square Garden. He tends to react at those moments and has a visceral reaction where it's we're going to hire Phil Jackson, or we're going to fire this person. So I think tomorrow's game plus Atlanta's game, this is really going to be.
He loves to win the PR game, and if he's losing badly, that's when he'll get those guys up on a stage, and he'll basically make them stand there while people throw tomatoes at him.
Yeah.
Because it's like, we know what Dolan's all about. He's all about the money, the business side, but he's loyal to a fault. He pays guys, but he hates when it backfires, when he keeps paying the wrong people. And don't get me wrong, this Fizdale experiment hasn't been, the Tibbs experiment hasn't been anywhere near the disaster that Fizdale. Like, Tom Thibodeau has contributed something to the Knicks' future during his time here. That tenure may have just run its course now, but I don't think it's been any disaster compared to the Fizdale situation. Obviously, we got the 4th seed. It's just not going in the right direction right now. Can they be patient and keep Tibbs? I just don't see that happening. I know a lot of fans do want patience, and they do want us to not keep firing coaches. Truth is, when you hire any coach, they're hired to be fired anyway. Like, unless you're a Pop, unless you're a Spoelstra, unless you're a Jerry Sloan, even what's that Utah's Snyder's great run with the Jazz came to an end. So it's just Tibbs coming to the end of his run. I mean. I know we heard from Berman and that how badly Tom Thibodeau wanted the Spider deal done. So if Leon really had Tibbs' best interests, he would have got him the guy you needed. But he didn't do that.
And let me throw this in too. This is a point I almost forgot about. It may have been because it was a matinee game. But from my perspective, watching the game from the comfort of my own home, there were some empty seats there.
Really?
Yeah, there were some empty seats in the lower bowl, and that's something that conveys a shift in interest. And the numbers at the Garden is one thing, but like when you have people who, I'm assuming that those tickets were paid for, but when you have those empty seats that are kind of clear behind the scorer's table, behind the announcer's booth, that probably translates also into ratings. And that's the business aspect of it, where it's like, okay, as a business person, this kind of middling, uninspired performance, there are some financial elements to it, and there are some financial repercussions of this. So how many people are going to, watch the game? How many people are going to attend the game? That level of lack of interest seems like it's starting to pop up. It's starting to become more palpable, where people are not only like disinterested, but they're not even paying attention. And that's the worst thing, where people, we're diehards. We're here. But when you have people who are like not even interested, that's where it might force the fate of Tibbs.
Yeah, I think these bad losses contributed to that. RJ Barrett not coming out and, exciting the fan base was one big thing as well. I think, like the Portland one, I keep going back. That's like the worst loss of this season to me. I want everyone in the chat to put their worst loss this season,
Oof.
and you tell me. But I think the Portland one was, you spent all this money. We had a healthy roster, and Jeremy Grant and Anthony Simons, right? Damian Lillard's sidekicks come in and put up career highs on us, right? I'm surprised James Dolan didn't do something then. That was unacceptable to lose that game. Julius Randle switching, RJ Barrett switching back and forth down the stretch. There was no pull your shorts up and play any defense. That game was just like, I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm disrespecting Jeremy Grant. He's a nice player, but 44 points at the Garden. Has a New York Knicks scored 44 points this season on their own arena?
Dude, they can. I mean, we go to the stat line. I don't think they scored 44 points in the second half, or the first. Like they were close to 44 points. What's the worst? I was gonna say today, but I do think
Nets was pretty bad.
Yeah, I think I don't even know. Like, I think today's loss was really bad because Spencer Dinwiddie.
Prisoner of the moment.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna go with today's loss, and I agree with you. Portland was really bad because Anthony Simons and Jeremy Grant. But today's was really bad because
OKC was close second.
The fact we could actually do this is indicative. But today's was bad because of the fact that, you had a 14, it was the 45-point swing for me. That to me was embarrassing.
That was ugly because the game was going so well as well. Same as the Blazers game. We were up 14.
Yeah.
I think. That's why this is good therapy. Everyone just get it off your chest, get that demon out there. Because hopefully there's blue skies on the horizon. You got to go through some pain to get some gain.
Yeah.
I guess. And I saw Pudge Nice put Tibbs was the table setter as well. So, some dudes have to crawl so that someone can walk. Someone has to walk so that the other guy can run.
Yeah.
Maybe Tibbs failing. If he fails here and he gets let go, we change our perspective and the front office and look at things from a more peel it back kind of longer term thing. The next guy hopefully is developmental, not someone who's trying to come in and just try to pick up wins, all over again.
Yeah.
Thunder.
I've reached the point where it's like, I was optimistic last night, and this was a deflating loss. It was a deflating loss.
I was shocked, to be honest, when I saw the score. And remember, I said a point where when we're up, we failed to put our foot on someone's throat.
Yeah,
I think that was the same as the Portland one. When we let Dallas hang around today, and they leveled the score, I think at halftime they would have come out with more confidence. They'd have been like, "Man, fellas, we played a bad first half, and we're level with the Knicks.
Yeah.
Let's come out, hit some shots, and we're Gucci."
Yeah, I mean, that's why I wonder, I actually after the loss, I was thinking to myself, I wonder what the players are doing right now after this loss, because when I forget which game it was, I think it might have been the OKC game. I'm probably wrong about this, but when they had the players only meeting, there are but so many players only meeting that you can have.
Yeah, I was about to say this exact same thing, fam. We need a players only meeting every week.
Yeah.
I mean, and it goes back to how comfortable this team feels on the road, and how uncomfortable they feel at MSG.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's straight weird, you know, how teams come in here, MSG. We can't put forth 4 quarters of play.
Tom from Huntington. Yeah. That's why this is the worst loss.
Oh,
Spencer Dinwiddie
and,
and Tim Hardaway saying, "This is my city."
and you know what's consistent too? I guarantee you we get all-star Julius where? On the West Coast. At LA,
Absolutely.
Dallas, Phoenix. That's when you see Julius Randle just play out of his mind. Remember Denver? He was diving on the floor,
Yeah.
jumping ahead of guys, getting floor burn. I've never seen Julius get floor burn at MSG. That's the mecca.
I don't know. I don't have anything else smart to say. I'm at the point where it's just going to be like really like, yeah, today was embarrassing. And again, like I didn't even stick around for the player interviews. I have no idea what the players said after the game, because what do you like? Do the players apologize to Tibbs? Does Tibbs apologize to the players? Like this is the kind of loss where there has to be some level of apology, because it's so heartbreaking. It's disappointing.
I think there is a few different agendas in the locker room, to be honest with you. There's a few different. As a GM, you create these situations, right? When you have Obi and IQ that uncertain with their future, you know, you have a Mitch and you have an RJ that got the bag and they want their role, want their touches. You have Brunson, a new piece that you just brought in, who's taken over the #1 mantle. I'm not saying there's any dysfunction, but best believe there's different agendas in that locker room, you know.
Yeah.
And that's why we're not seeing a team, a group of guys that aren't just leaving it out there for each other, you know. You know, players have said certain things in interviews that made you raise your eyebrow in the past. You know, we've seen sample size of that. Remember Tibbs called out RJ at one point.
Yeah.
You know,
but that happened in the season.
Yeah, it's been great therapy. We could go all night, but enjoy the rest of your evening. EJ, salute, bro.
Thanks,
Let's continue this situation. We've got Cleveland, Atlanta, Charlotte, thick and fast. We'll keep our finger on the pulse if anything breaks. But Knicks Streets, Knicks Nation, stay blessed. Appreciate everyone out here rocking with us. Smash that like button. And we'll see you on the next one. Peace.